So hi everyone and welcome to another Doqaru Sofa Chats episode. Today I am delighted to have a very special guest with me, someone that I've known for more than 10 years, although we had a big gap in between. And this is Louise McCullough, who's a trauma orthopaedic consultant at Aberdeen Royal Infirmary, and someone that many of you may know from the Channel 4 programme SAS Who Dares Win. So welcome, Louise.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So I wanted to invite Louise onto the podcast. Obviously, we usually talk a lot of business, but for me, everything in business revolves around people. And the people leading business is very similar, to leading any other type of profession. And I worked with Louise between, trying to think of the years, between 2006 and 2011. I'm not sure if you were in the unit that whole time, but definitely towards the end you were. And I remember, first of all, there weren't many female consultants back then. That may have changed now. But also, I just thought it would be fantastic to speak to someone that's come from that trauma background, because I know I've taken a lot of lessons from it, and I'm sure that you have, Louise, and continue to do so. So do you want to tell us a bit about, I guess, what's a day in the life of Louise like? What's your typical day?
Well, that's a bit difficult just now because my typical day is not typical just now. Coronavirus has massively impacted what we do in the hospital and how our daily routines work. We have a much bigger presence in first contact of patients. We've got a new orthopaedic assessment unit, as well as having cover in our minors unit, or our minor injuries unit. So my current day doesn't bear particularly any resemblance to what it did maybe 4 or 5 months ago. I'm fairly fortunate in that because of what I specialise in. So I specialise in orthopaedic oncology and trauma, that those two facets of orthopaedics are still ongoing. So I'm still doing a tumour clinic, and I'm still doing all my trauma work as normal. Tumour work essentially just means dealing with people who present with lumps and bumps, lesions in bone, metastatic disease, so people who've got primary cancer somewhere else and it's spread into their bone, and just trauma, just as standard. Mm-hmm. People get overly excited with their DIY.
You work with children and adults, don't you?
No, I don't do very much kids stuff at all. I do some of the tumour work would be kids, but the majority of it's mainly adults.
Yeah, I think that must be really hard, because when I worked on the adult ward, it was only 13 years old and up, and even nursing some of those 13-year-olds was really tough, and it's dealing with the parents and what they were going through as well. So Louise, I know that you love a challenge and you're always looking for that next challenge. So what I guess drove you to go from trauma surgeon to applying to go on SAS Who Dares Win?
So I think, like you say, I've always liked to challenge, and even even in the introduction you said that there weren't very many female orthopaedic surgeons around whenever you were in the unit. And whenever you were in the unit, I was a registrar actually. And I think, was I maybe the only female registrar at that time?
Yeah.
So I was the only female registrar at that time. Certainly there's more women coming into orthopaedics now. But that's always been like even one of the challenges of my job, as being a female in a very male-dominated environment. Mm-hmm. And I think I became a consultant 5 years ago. So whenever you're a trainee, you have all of these different kind of hoops that you have to jump through. You have different exams to pass, different jobs to get, fellowships to get, and then once you get your consultant job, well, it maybe takes you a couple of years to settle in, but then you don't really have those same challenges. Don't get me wrong, every tumour patient I see and every trauma patient has their own individual challenges, but you don't have anything to you don't have a goal to aim for. And I very much took all those goals and challenges, I took those out of my work into my hobbies. So I did entered Ninja Warrior, I started teaching an exercise class, I did white collar boxing, and then I just happened to see an advert for SAS Who Dares Wins, and it was on Facebook, and it's one of the very few programs that myself and my husband would sit down to watch. And it just so happened at the end of the last series, he goes like, Louise, you need to go on that program. And I'm like, well, they don't have women on it, so I can't. And then they were looking specifically for women for our series. And so I just kind of applied for it. I genuinely didn't really think that I would get in, but I thought it would even be interesting to see the whole process of like how it works and how they pick people and what the exercise test would be. And like I say, all of these programs kind of love a backstory, and I didn't really feel like I had one. I'm not like, I've not been in prison for anything before. I'm not some previous drug addict, or, they always like a backstory, and I didn't really feel like I had one, so I thought it was unlikely that I was going to get in.
You just save lives every day. That's not much of a story at all.
No, it's just my job. It's just what I do.
Yeah. And how was the process to get in? Was it as difficult as you expected? Did you feel that challenged you? Or it was
definitely a challenge, but I didn't really have anything to compare it to. So it genuinely was just for the experience is the reason I did it. I even entered it just to because I remember going down, the exercise test was in Newcastle, and I remember vividly just getting on the train by myself one Saturday morning to try and get down to Newcastle for lunchtime, and I vividly remember getting to Dundee and just going, I could just get off here and go and play with some friends for the day and then go back up the road again, because there's no point in me going to do this. This is ridiculous. I'm never going to get picked. And then I just was like, oh, well, might as well see what happens.
Did they do a psych review as part of that, process? Because when I watched the show, obviously there's a lot of mind over matter, and, there's obviously the physical challenge, but the mental challenge must be significantly more than the physical challenge. And I just thought, this could really break a lot of people. So yeah. Did they do any level of, psych review with you guys?
Yeah, so they had we had a psychiatric medical report as part of very late on in the process. And I think there was once it got down to the final 40, there was another exercise test, and then the psychiatric medical report. And it was kind of really in that psychiatric report that this woman sitting across the table from me, and she's like, so you're an orthopaedic surgeon, why do you want to do this? And I'm like, well, or she goes, why do you want to be on this reality show? And I'm like, it's not a reality show. Yes it is. And I was like, really? And that was the one point where I was like, shit, maybe I shouldn't be doing this, I've got all these patients who really rely on me, and then they're going to see me on this reality show. How's that going to look? And then we actually had a decent half an hour chat about the kind of potential repercussions of it. Mm-hmm. And it kind of ended up with her going, well, it's not Love Island, so.
Yeah, I think I knowing you how I do, I think at the start you were probably just like, this is amazing, going to be an amazing challenge if I can do this and prove this to myself. But it was probably, all about the challenge and probably not thinking about the bigger picture and the impact it would have on your life ongoing. So what did NHS say about it? Were they quite happy, or did you have to?
I'm not entirely sure I ever asked anybody. But the only reason I got to go was because our management in orthopaedics were amazing. They were so supportive and couldn't have been more helpful. Otherwise,
the guys on the ward were.
Well, nobody really knew about it until it came on TV.
Okay.
So
just your close colleagues, I guess, that had to understand why you were away for so long.
Well, even really, because I was only really away for 2 weeks.
Okay.
So no, nobody really knew that I was away until it was on TV.
And how did it feel being away and being not contactable? Because I guess as a, someone in your role, even if you're on holiday, probably do you have to, take the odd call now and again, or, a patient will pop up that you've not seen for months and they're in a really bad way and you want to be involved with, helping them. How did that feel, just being completely cut off from communication, I guess?
So that's quite difficult to answer, actually, because for me to get away, I think I'd done 5 24-hour shifts out of 7 the week before I left, and so I'd done all these 24-hour shifts. I was absolutely knackered. I biopsied a couple of really horrible tumours as well before I left, and it was always in the back of my mind, like, who is somebody going to pick up that result? Is somebody going to deal with it? Because I was away and I knew I was uncontactable. So I kind of had left all of these like sort of, you need to do this, and I just had to rely on my team. And that's what, you rely on your team so much that it just becomes, that's what you do. Even though you're there and you would maybe check, but whenever you're completely reliant on them picking up the pieces for you, it actually makes you feel really quite guilty.
Yeah, I thought you would say that, because I remember even working on like Christmas Day and stuff. So you'd have the balance between, oh, we really need to phone this consultant or this registrar, and oh, we really don't want to interrupt their Christmas. Even, they probably weren't on call, but as you say, you're always contactable. And then we'd have the other consultants that would come in on Christmas Day, even though they didn't have to, just so they could say hi to their patients and bring some chocolates in for the nurses or whatever. So I'm very aware of how, it literally is your life. It's not this job that you can work, 12 hours a day, leave it, and it's, it goes, because, they always say leave it, your job at work, but it's just impossible when you're working in that sort of environment. It's really difficult.
Especially whenever you're treating tumour patients. I actually was speaking to a new patient yesterday, and I'm really blunt in how I speak to my patients. If I feel something or if I think something, they will know it, and I wear my heart on my sleeve. If I will more than happily turn around and say, look, I was wrong, this is this, but I wear my heart on my sleeve, and if I think it, then they will know about it. And if I don't hide anything, if I can give a rough estimate of a prognosis or anything like that, I will do so. And I think it's whenever you have that relationship with your patients, that makes it really quite difficult. And that's also what made it difficult for me whenever we were in that psychiatric medical report, because my tumour patients, I see them every 3 months for 2 years, then 6 monthly for up to 5 years, and then annually for 5 years after that. So you have this really special relationship with those patients that other orthopaedic consultants don't really have. Mm-hmm. And it's very difficult to kind of explain that relationship in a way.
Yeah, I think because I remember you being very blunt and upfront, and I know that for some of the other doctors and nurses, it was a bit, oh my goodness, I can't believe she said that. But I really like that about you, and it's something that I've always tried to be myself, and in business especially. But I think in when you're in a hospital setting, you know, especially that trauma comes in, if you start trying to fluff everything up, they don't trust you. Whereas the more direct you are with them, you know, they might not like what they're hearing, but they really, I think it helps build that trust much faster when you're direct, and you're, you know, also willing to own up when you've made a mistake as well, because we're all human. And I remember I really liked that about you. And when I watched back at the show, and yeah, you were totally the Louise I remembered from the ward. Probably even
selfish, not a team player.
But it's probably your confidence that's built over the years, because you've overcome a lot of the challenges, you know, of, I guess, proving yourself as a doctor and getting to that consultant level. So yeah, I get that. But I do remember some people be like on tender hooks when you were around a little bit, if I'm totally honest. But that was more just because you were direct and honest, and some people just don't know how to take that, which is more their problem than it is yours, in my opinion. I
feel that I treat my patients how I would want to be treated, or how I would want my family to be treated. I don't feel like, if there's no point telling somebody it's going to be okay if it's not going to be okay. If you've got somebody who has had a horrific limb-threatening injury and somebody's going up to them and saying, "Oh, it's going to be fine, we're going to fix it," mm-hmm. that's not helpful, because then they have this false expectation. And there's certain injuries that, yeah, I can reconstruct that, but I am never going to make you normal after this. You know, I can do my very best, and I will do my very best, but with the best will in the world, you're not, it's not going to be normal after that.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my best friends had a really bad car accident. I remember having my interview on the trauma unit as she was still in the HDU, like the post-op room.
Yeah.
On 46, which isn't even called 46 anymore. And I was visiting her, and the ward sister at the time came and took me away for my interview, and then I went back to her, and she had crush injuries to both legs. It was Mr. Bodie that looked after her, and he said it was literally like cornflakes. It was some of the worst crush injuries they'd ever seen. And he persevered and managed to reconstruct. But now, what, 12 years on, 13 years on, she was in a wheelchair for a long time, and then crutches, and even now she's in excruciating pain and struggles every day. And so many times she said to me, sometimes I wish they just, you know,
amputated your leg, because it's not and that's not an unreasonable feeling, because often, like, it's hard, you know, once you've had an amputation, it's not that it's easy, but you can kind of move on from that, because you've got a path to take. You've got limb fitting and getting your prosthesis, and there's so many innovations in prosthetics now that it's amazing. Mm-hmm. Like I do genuinely think that that's a really difficult decision to make, but there's certain injuries where you can reconstruct that, but you are always questioning whether an amputation would be better. Yeah. So it's really difficult. It's those difficult decisions that you have to rely a little bit on your gut and a little bit on your experience.
Yeah. So talking about those difficult decisions, I guess, did you find any similarities, and I guess pulling on that gut, between, I guess, what you go through at work and what you had to go through on the show once you were in the thick of it? Were there similarities there?
It's kind of difficult to compare them, really, because there's times whenever there's times when it's similar, when, especially if like, for example, you're on call a weekend and you're on call the whole weekend, you're up all night one night, you have to stay in, do theatre the next day, and you're begging for it to be quiet the following night so you can get a decent sleep before you come in and do it all again. And it is a little bit like, it was a little bit like that feeling of being on call where you're always on tenterhooks waiting for the phone to ring. It was similar but worse. Mm-hmm. in the program, because so that was like a continuous 12 days, I think, 11 days. And it was relentless. It was 24/7, just waiting for them to barge through the door, waiting for them to haul you out of your bed, not to have done something properly, you know. And so it was similar, but multiplied.
And it looked like you were typically left to it. You know, the DSs only seemed to come in once there was a challenge. Was that the case, or were there people going around?
No, but those, you have to bear in mind that what you saw on TV was like maybe 5% of the stuff that we did, you know, and it was so condensed that anytime, so we never saw the DS out with if they were coming to shout at you, getting you up into the yard for a beasting, getting you away to do tasks and stuff. And like a lot of the tasks and things that we did, they weren't shown on TV. Mm-hmm. So like the downtime that we had was pretty minimal. And then even overnight, whenever maybe we didn't get a beasting, we had to do rotations of guard duty every night. So it was like you were always your sleep was always interrupted. Mm-hmm. Even if it wasn't by the DS, it was by trying to make sure that you got up without having an alarm clock. You know, so because none of us had any, we didn't have our phone, we didn't really have our watches, you know, you didn't have anything, so you're completely reliant on
just being on those tender hooks all the time, waiting for someone else to shout at you.
Absolutely.
Well. Who was your favorite DS?
Mark Billingham.
Mark. There's the celebrity one on at the moment, isn't there?
Yeah, just finished yesterday.
You've been watching it?
Yeah.
Yeah. You got any favourites so far? People you think might win?
I was surprised by the people who did win, actually, or who did pass it.
Yeah. I watched your one, and I watched the one before you.
Yeah, the Moroccan one, it was good.
But I haven't seen, I don't watch a lot of TV. But my sister absolutely loves it, and I think her and her partner went to see, was it in Aberdeen?
Mm-hmm. And was up in Aberdeen, and Billy was up in Aberdeen as well.
Was Ollie not up in Aberdeen as well?
I don't think so. I certainly didn't see him. I think Foxy was up for, he's been up doing a couple of talks, but I've never caught up with him.
Foxy is good friends with Lee Spencer.
Oh, is he?
Yeah. Sorry, for the purpose of the podcast, because people know what we're talking about. Lee Spencer, another incredible guy, who I did a webinar with last week that Louise attended. But he's a ex-Marine, but he served with Foxy, and they're really good friends. So yeah, you mentioned that when you speak to him. So we've spoken, I guess the Lee prompts just reminded me, we've spoken a lot about, I guess, the perception people have of life and the resilience they build when they're in the military. And you know, you've probably seen even more of that just from getting to know some of the DSs and being on the show and looking into that way of life a little bit more. And something that we both, I guess, noticed when listening to Lee speak was when he had to have his amputation, you know, how he coped with that straight from waking up, versus some of the other people, I guess, we've now looked after and seen how they've come through it on the ward. And I think that's quite an interesting conversation. Do you want to touch on that maybe a little bit, and so what you learned from listening to Lee's talk?
So just a bit of background is that before we started recording, we were talking about Lee's talk and how amazing he was and how resilient he was. But one of the things that he'd said was, you know, that whenever you're in the military, you go out every day, you leave your barracks, and you are not entirely sure that you're going to come back. And I think that maybe without even recognizing how much resilience that builds in you, and if you have that thought in your mind that there's potential for you to be injured, to have such a severe injury that you lose a limb. And even if it is whenever you're in part of the military, I suspect that you never really lose that. So the story, what Lee's story is he was involved in a road traffic accident where he lost his leg at the side of a road, and he essentially nearly bled to death, and it was only because there was a chap and his daughter who came by who stood in his groin and stopped the bleeding that Lee's still here today. It's an absolutely amazing story of resilience and knowing and having, I suppose it's having the wherewithal as to know how to manage such a severe injury. And that will all have been his military training, you know. If that had been any civilian in exactly the same circumstances, they wouldn't be here today, unless there had been somebody close by who had those skills, you know. And I think that Lee maybe doesn't appreciate how much resilience he's built through his career. And one of my talks I do is about resilience, and I think resilience is kind of, I don't really like it as a word. I think that it's a bit watery. It doesn't really mean very much. Everybody has resilience to some degree, but not everybody has it to the same degree. And resilience, I would kind of describe as your bounce back ability. Like, it's how you can bounce back from adversity, and everybody has adversity. Everybody has life trauma. Everybody has, like, they lose loved ones. They have break up in relationships. You have issues at work. You maybe lose your job. Everybody has life traumas, life events, you know. And your normal resilience is how you cope with those, how you bounce back, and what sort of person those things make you. So resilience is one sort of end of a spectrum, and I think grit is the other end of that spectrum. So grit's completely separate. So grit I would describe as, like, if you're an Olympic athlete, right? You have 4 years where you get to train for the next Olympics. You maybe have any number of life events within those 4 years. You maybe have an injury, you have other races to run, and all of those things are what develop your resilience. But your grit is your determination to keep going to get to your final outcome, and that's what Lee has. And not everybody has that, I think. And I think so. That's why I think that it's such an, honestly, I could talk for hours about it. It's just so interesting. How you develop. Everybody can build on resilience, but not everybody. I don't think that you can find grit. Do you know? I don't think that you can learn grit. I think that there's something deep inside you that makes you want to do it. And whether that's passion for what you want to achieve, or just stubborn perseverance, I'm not entirely sure, or a combination of both.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one thing that you probably found when you did go on the show is the resilience that you'd built yourself through the work you've done over the years in your own life. And that probably helped you get ahead of a lot of other people within I don't know, you called it the camp or the group, because, you know, every day, I think some of us are waiting for that next bit of adversity, that next hurdle, or as I call them, speed bumps.
Yeah.
I just see a life as a road with lots of speed bumps.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of people that go through life thinking it'll never happen to them, whether that be, you know, an illness, whether it be a trauma, a tragedy. And I think when it does finally hit those people, because it does at some point, it really hits them hard. And they're the ones that I feel like you need to, you know, give that more support to. Sure. And, you know, of course, once they've gone through one thing, every time after that, it's going to be that little bit easier, and they're going to learn what their tools are within them to help them, because we're all different how we cope with these things as well. Absolutely. But I think when in medicine, even if you haven't gone through the things yourself, because every day you're watching other people go through it, and people of all ages, all, I guess, what you'd class as health. You know, some people are very fit and healthy, but they still get diagnosed with cancers and still have car accidents. I think there's something in you where you know it can happen to you. I don't think you'd find many people that work on a trauma unit that would say it'll never happen to me.
Oh, exactly.
If anything, I think it makes you that little bit more careful when you're driving around, and probably if you play sport, you know fine well what could happen. So is that something that you recognize within yourself?
Well, it's actually really interesting. I was speaking, I have a new patient yesterday, and it's actually just a heartbreaking story, but she was just saying exactly the same thing. She was just saying, you know, it's my journey's just like this like multiple speed bumps, and she's just got so much resilience that, you know, she knows that it's not going to go on forever, and she only has this finite amount of time. But every speed bump that she just hits, she's just like, oh well, we just need to deal with it, you know. And I think that's what makes it really interesting. And I talk about this a lot in my talks as well, is that people who, these patients, my tumor patients have just got so much resilience, and they just find this like deeper strength to kind of persevere through absolutely horrific pain and horrific symptoms. And the patients, like, don't get me wrong, I absolutely heartfelt sorry for my patients, but actually for them, they just have to persevere on with their journey. They have to like hit the speed bump, work through it, and they just have to keep going. But for their families and for their relatives who are, they can only sit back and watch, you know. There's only so much support that you can give, and every single one of them, I'm sure, would try and go through it for them, would go through all of their pain and their symptoms for them if they could, but they just can't. And that feeling of helplessness must be horrific. Yeah. You know, so the families of these guys who are with my cancer patients, my heart goes out to them every time I see them.
Yeah, because they're really on that journey too, aren't they? Like you say, it's like when you watch any programs where there's women in labor, and you've got the husband or the man, you know, completely helpless. You know, the most they can do is rub their back or something, and the woman's like determined, and I'm going to do this, and let's get on with it. And the guy's standing there like is watching this wife in pain and suffering, and just can't do anything. And
you've got too much time in your hands if you're watching TV like
that. Yeah. So with support as well, obviously there's a lot of you give a lot of physical support, but there's the mental side is probably even more important in a lot of these cases. And when you were on the show, did you get any, I guess, psychological support afterwards? Because it's such an intense period, like you said, that sort of 11-12 days, a lot happened, you're all absolutely exhausted. You know, did you get ongoing support for that? And do you feel like it affected you at all psychologically?
So there's, as well as having a psychiatric medical report before we went, there's psychologists that came with us. So there was 2 psychologists with us all the time, and they're watching. So even though you don't see any of the production team, you don't, apart from every so often you need to get your batteries changed and your microphones and things, and you see some of the cameramen and the sound guys whenever you're out on location. But whenever you're in the actual camp itself, they're only static cameras. You don't really see anybody. But there were two psychologists who were there all the time. And whenever you leave, you have to see the doctor, and then you have to go and have a kind of debrief with one of the psychologists, and then they will follow that up with you for the next 2 or 3. They'll follow you up whenever you go home. I happened to be on holiday for the week after, so they contacted me back whenever I was back from holiday, and then whenever I'd gone back to work, once I'd been back at work for a week, and then just before the show came on, they contacted me back again. So yeah, no, it's very well supported, and I can't say enough about how good the production team were. They absolutely looked after us all amazingly well.
It's great to hear, because I guess with everything that's been in the press, especially around Love Island, and all the, I guess, the knock-on effect of being on a reality TV show. And I know the two shows are very different.
I think that's one of the reasons that they had to have a medical psych report, is because of Big Brother. I think there were a couple of people who committed suicide after that. So I think that's like a part of any reality show now, is that they have to have psychiatric support.
Yeah.
Or psychology support.
How have you found, I guess, from being, Louise, the consultant, and, NHS, to walking probably down, the streets of Aberdeen and being recognised and people asking for photographs and things? That must be really bizarre.
Nobody really does that. I feel like I'm not famous. I'm not famous enough for that.
When you came onto the webinar last week, the amount of messages I got going, is that the same person? Is that Louise from SAS? I was like, yeah. Even one of my staff members didn't realise that we knew each other. And she was WhatsApping me while you were asking the question, going, oh my God, it's...
No, I don't feel like I'm famous enough for that.
Oh, wow. There are definitely people that are recognising you. You've been doing a lot of speaking engagements as well, which is...
yeah, I've done a few. I do... I've got a whole range of topics if anybody wants to hear about them.
So what's the best way for people to get in touch with you, Louise?
I've got a website, and there's a contact form on that, or
LinkedIn as well, aren't you?
LinkedIn, yeah.
Yeah, I'm very aware of time. I know you've got to get back to the ward at 11. You said.
Oh yeah, that's okay. I'm good for.
Okay, that's fine. I knew that time pressures are going to be important here, so yeah. Well, maybe I'll do a few more questions then, if that's okay. And then we'll cut it.
I'll turn you off if I run out of time.
What's that?
I'll turn you off if you're
yeah, that's fine. So a lot of people have, I guess, over the years said to me about, how have you gone from working as a trauma nurse into business, and the story.
How did you decide which part of business you were going to go into, or how did you decide what was for you after? Because obviously, as a nurse, you've probably had this focused career for so long, and then to just go, oh, I can't do that anymore. What am I going to do?
Yeah, I didn't decide. That's probably the best way to say it. I fell into it. So when I first left NHS, well, they'd offered to redeploy me within NHS, but the thought of sitting on a clinic doing admin work was, when I was used to the meant to be 12-hour shifts, often 14 hours by the time you got out, and the constant adrenaline and challenge that came with working in a unit like that. The thought of sitting in a clinic, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 was just, I couldn't think of anything worse at the time. And that was the only place they'd redeploy me. They said they couldn't even put me into, the kitchens or clinics or nothing, because it was sole working. And for anyone listening that doesn't know why I left nursing, I was diagnosed with epilepsy. And at the time, they said I had to leave nursing and I could have gone back once I was 2 years seizure free. I became seizure free actually within 14 months of diagnosis. And then obviously you have to let that go for a year. But by that point I was on just such a different path. So when I left nursing, I went to all the recruitment agencies in Aberdeen, as you do, because I didn't have a clue. I didn't even write in a CV. I was like, what do I do on a CV? Because it's, you're wanting to talk about, all your spinal, maneuvers and your experience and your HEI audits and, all the stuff that nobody in the business world cares about or understands. So I remember getting some help to write a CV, and then the recruitment agencies kept saying to me, we don't know what to do with you, you're a nurse. We don't know what to do with you, you're a nurse. Weren't very helpful. And a few people had said to me, what's your transferable skills? Because you really need to be able to pull them out and put it within the conversations you're having and, within that CV. And at the time, I was really struggling to figure out what those were. Now I look back, I feel like slapping myself across the face. There's so much you bring from it. There's so much you learn. And the job I got, it was out of luck, really. I had a friend that was moving to Portugal and her role was becoming available. So she offered to give my CV to her boss. They interviewed me A lot of the interview questions I really struggled to answer because they were, I guess, for somebody that had been in an office environment, which I hadn't. But the one question they asked me, which I guess is that typical interview question of, when have you had to work in a challenging, you know, environment or a challenging role, and how did you overcome that? And I burst out laughing, and I just, you know, I just laughed and said, well, I've been working in a trauma ward for 5 years. You know, literally things change lifetime, and, you know, there's someone needed resuscitated here, and there's someone getting their leg cut off over here. You know, it's always challenging, and you're always having to be at the top of your game to make sure your patients are safe and make sure that your team are supported and everything else. And the director, about a year later, told me that's why she gave me the job. She said, it was when you answered that question, I knew that I could throw anything at you and you would just get on with it. And I did. And with that role, it changed a lot. And I got involved with almost every aspect of business, working alongside the directors. And that really helped me, I guess, figure out what those transferable skills were. And it was really that resilience and that grit, you know, of just get on with it. Don't moan about it, just get on with it, which you just have to do in, you know, the previous role. But it's amazing in business how many people, you know, just make excuse after excuse after excuse. And not just in business, I'm sure in every type of profession. And I think what was really difficult in those initial probably 6 months was coming into a role where it, you know, there was quite a routine, which I wasn't really used to. Obviously we had, you know, get everyone up in the morning, ward rounds, there was certain times of the day people ate and drank, but other than that, it was carnage. And it was really bizarre having, you're laughing, having a bit of a routine, but also the fact people were getting really stressed out about paperwork. And it took me a long time to build respect for that, because I was just looking at them going, are you kidding me? There's way worse things that could be happening here. And I used to say, you know, it's not life or death, you know, it's paperwork, it's fine. And I remember my director saying to me, why do you not get stressed? And she was getting really frustrated with me. And it took me a while to realize that I could not expect other people to have the same, I guess, perspective about that stuff as I had. And I had to respect that they were truly stressed out about this paperwork, and that was okay. But it took me a while, and I think I probably pissed off quite a few people, and I was a bit rude a few times until I got used to that. And now, as being a business owner and leading a team and realizing, I think one of the most important things I realized from working in a hospital setting is no one person can do everything. And if you look at someone like you, who's a fantastic surgeon, you could not perform that surgery without that team around you. You know, your anaesthetist, your nurses, everything. And I think that was a great lesson, because I've never tried to do everything myself. I've always tried to find really good people to have around me and build that support network, and just treat everyone the same. Because as a nurse, like, you know, you have famous footballers coming in, it could be a member of the royal family, it does not matter. We all shit, you know, at the end of the day. We all break legs, you know, we're all human. And I think that was also a fantastic learning, is you don't put these people on a pedestal. It doesn't matter who they are, we're all the same. So when I came into business, if someone was a CEO or a managing director, I felt quite comfortable talking to them. And a lot of people thought that was really bizarre, because I was seen as this sort of junior level person, and I was female and I was young, and what are you doing talking to the middle-aged, you know, CEO guy? But I've built up some amazing relationships with these people just by not putting them on a pedestal and treating them as humans, I guess. So there are so many transferable skills. And if you'd said to me 8 years ago that in 8 years you're going to be a business owner and you're going to have a team and you're going to be working in the oil and gas industry, I would have laughed at you. And if you told me I was going to work in sales, I would have told you where to go, because to me, a salesperson was either, you know, the really annoying sales reps that would come in with all the medical equipment, that and car salesmen were the two things in my head, probably, when it came to sales. That's what sales was. But what I've realized is sales is all about people and relationships, especially B2B, business to business sales. And I have learned so much from my days as a nurse and working in a trauma environment that I now use every single day in business. And yeah, it's a bit bizarre, but that's probably quite a long-winded answer to your question.
I think that you brought up so many like really important points there. So like perspective is so important, and like so perspective is one thing. Taking responsibility for things, like taking responsibility for your own actions and taking responsibility for looking after patients, taking responsibility for your own decisions. And everybody fucks it up, you know. You just have to admit it. And these people who make decisions make mistakes, but are not willing to step up to the mark and say, okay, I'm really sorry, I fucked up, this is what I'm going to do to fix it. Those are the people that really wind me up, because while I might be blunt, I will also be blunt whenever, if I've messed up and I've made a mistake, I'll just hold my hand up and say, okay, can you help me? I can't fix this, I've messed up. And it's that ability, I think. And you're also saying about being a leader and creating your team around you to, not everybody's good at everything. And the ability to create your team to fill your deficits, and also those people who maybe you're like a starter, you know, you're like have all the ideas, you're an ideas person, but actually get into the crux of the thing, you're like, yeah, I'm done with that, I've got another idea now. Yeah. It's having those people who are the opposite to you, who are like the finisher. Now it's having the insight, I think, to appreciate what your own skills are, and creating your team to kind of, I suppose, add to your own skills as well. As well as pushing you too. If you've got somebody who's a real good finisher, you can learn a lot from that person, and it's those abilities of learning from others. And like you say, I couldn't do my job. I'm nothing. I am my team. My team is everything. And I think in the program they kind of really identified, this is just my perception, and if any of the DS are watching or listening and you're just like, yeah, Louise, you're talking nonsense. But I kind of feel like they probably identified very early on that I was probably mentally and physically tough enough to make it to the end. And they played mind games with me from the very get-go. Like the whole selfish and not a team player thing. And like everything I do is entirely reliant on my team. And that's really, you know, that really hurt. And that was really hard. Like to really question my teamwork. I'm like, you think I'm not a team player? Everything I do relies on my team. Yeah. So yeah.
From working with you, I know you're a team player, because there was a lot of doctors that were not team players. Not so much with the multidisciplinary team with your nurses and physios and OTs, but even just their little team, you know, when they were training, you know, registrars, juniors, etc. There was a few that really weren't, you know, supportive of that sort of smaller team, and you could see it a mile away, and you'd hear, you know, the junior doctors talking about it.
So important. Like I'm trying, because of the whole coronavirus thing just now, we've got interim FY1s, and the one thing that you can not reiterate enough to these guys is that every single thing you do as a junior doctor, the nursing staff have all been there. They've all done it before. They did it last year. You know, if you have got any questions, just go and ask them. And if you look after the nurses, do what they ask you, you know, they will have your back. They will look out for you. They will make your life as easy as possible. But if you mess them
own up to your mistakes, like you said,
and don't treat them with respect, then you're in a hiding to nothing, because they can make your life hell.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, they really.
I remember one of the male nurses I worked with, you probably know fine well who I'm talking about, sending an FY1 to the stores for fallopian tubes. And it's funny because you come out into oil and gas and you hear a lot of that stuff actually, with the young guys going offshore and all the tricks they play on them. And I was going, that's just like in the hospital. I remember when I got married, they tied me to a commode and poured all the slops from lunch all over me. And 40 sip drinks and everything. Like, it's absolute carnage in that place. Great fun. But you have to laugh or you would cry every day. You have to find something to laugh about. And, people in medical, we have a sick sense of humor, and it's never left me. And I have to remember where I am a lot of the time now because people don't appreciate it. Although one of our staff used to be a home carer, so we're kind of the same level with that. But yeah, and I guess just now, COVID, it'll be the same. I'm sure that everyone is trying to find those things to laugh about and to celebrate, and the small wins. And as a team, it's constantly celebrating those small wins every day, because it is such a challenging, it really takes its toll on you. If you can't find those things to smile about and laugh about every day, you just wouldn't make it. You just could not work there.
Whenever you were doing your 12-hour days and your 14-hour days, and as a nurse, what sort of things did you do for your downtime to kind of like de-stress, or like how did you manage to not take those home?
I was really lucky that I had a long commute. At the time I was living south of Stonehaven, and that drive was very if I lived 5 minutes from the hospital, I think I would have really struggled with that. I think that just trying to debrief, what had happened during that day, what could I have done better, what could I have done differently. That was, just thinking it over a little bit, I think really helps, because when you're in it, it's just 150 miles per hour. And
you don't get time to think, eh?
No, you don't get time to think. And I remember one of my biggest memories, speaking about the long hours, is working in the winter. And there was one winter, we ran out of plaster in the hospital. There were so many fractures. Was it 2010? And it was literally like a 6-month winter. It was just snowed. And on the news, they were saying to all the, elderly people, stay in your homes, because we broken hips left, right, and centre. And we actually had to get an ambulance to go to Dundee for like plaster Paris, because we'd ran out. There was that many fractures. And it was just horrendous. There was car accidents, people out on motorbikes in the snow. It was crazy. And I remember being exhausted. I'd done 4 days in a row, and it was like 6:30 at night. And I was like, I've got half an hour. And then the phone calls started coming in. I can't get there. The snow's too bad. And, all the night shift just saying, I can't get there. And obviously you can't just go home. That's what people don't understand. It's like, you can't just leave all these patients. If people can't come in, you're there till they do. And it was like 9-10 p.m. before we got out. And just as night shift should have been coming on, we had like 3 car accidents all come in at the same time. And I just remember being like, I need to sleep. So when you think about what you did on SAS, like in the exhaustion, I honestly don't know how you did it, because, you're used to being tired, and as a doctor, even more so than the nurses. So that must have taken it to a whole other level of exhaustion.
There's a wee kind of like, it's probably like been flying around Facebook or whatever. It says, pardon me, it talks about whether you're a night owl or an early bird. And it's just like, permanently exhausted pigeon.
I love that. I'm definitely a night owl. Honestly, I used to get up at 5:30 when back then for work. The thought of getting up at 5:30 now kills me. Absolutely kills me.
I'm an early morning. I'm up at 4:45, 5:30, 4:45.
Yeah.
And that's just lying. Normally it's a 4:45 before it happened.
I think you're just in that, and I would go to my bed much earlier then as well, where now I have a 3-year-old, so I kind of just get up when he gets up. He's the alarm clock. And then I work or do things into the night. Going back to your question of how did I guess, debrief every day, I wish I'd known about mindfulness back then.
Yeah.
Because since leaving nursing, I found mindfulness and I use it all the time now.
Yeah.
And I really hope that there's campaigns driven throughout NHS on, how important, useful mindfulness is, because I think that would have made it a hell of a lot easier. Absolutely.
I think that, so there's a thing called TRIM, which is trauma, risk and can't even remember what it stands for, but it's essentially like if there's some big event that happens that kind of psychologically scars you, then and there's been quite a lot of them. So the guys in Elgin with the serial killer and such like, and the certainly very definite events that happen that kind of create this trim response where if people are identified who would be at high risk of significant sort of mental anguish afterwards, I suppose. And but I don't really feel like I think it's a really important thing, and NHS Grampian are one of the only health boards that have taken it up, and it's something that's very commonly used in the military. Mm-hmm. But I think while I think it's an amazing resource, I think what's more useful is, like you say, mindfulness. And I think over the last maybe 2 or 3 years, maybe, I've certainly felt like I've used mindfulness a lot more than don't get me wrong, I'm not in any way, shape or form good at it, but I like we said, talked about on the programme, and I think it's very difficult for lay people to kind of understand, is that you actually just can't take stuff home with you. You kind of have to compartmentalise it somewhere, and it's not that you've forgotten about it or you're not dealing with it. It just means that it's there, but you can't dwell on it, I think. Yeah. Because some people, their mechanism might be to go home and rant about their day to their partner, but I have a partner, my husband does that. He will come home and he'll go, oh, well, this happened and this happened and this happened, and I'm like, yeah, okay. But then if I were to go home and say, okay, well, I've listened to you, so listen to me. So this person died, this person's got Mets, I've told somebody else they had cancer today. You know, it becomes a bit of a top trump, and it devalues what his issues are. You know, and you can't do that because it's not fair. Yeah. It's not fair on them, and I don't really feel that need that I need to release it in that way. I can kind of just go away and kind of just think over myself, and like I say, I'm not dwelling on it. It's just it's a process it almost, isn't it? I think you don't have time to process it while it's happening, because it's going at so fast. So it's just trying to take that time out to process it, and then after doing that processing, that's when mindfulness would have been really useful, because I think what I struggled with was trying to process everything, trying to have the windows open, the music on, maybe do a bit of exercise, but it was that transition between doing the processing to really being able to go home and be present with people, because some days I felt like I would go home and there'd been so much going on, or might not even be the same day, it might be the day after when I was on leave, and I felt like I was there, but I wasn't really present. And that can really affect our relationships with people. Absolutely. And it's the same now in business. That's been my hardest thing with being a parent and a business owner, has been when I'm with business at work.
Present. Yeah. And, I've made a lot of changes over the last 3 years to make sure that I'm, better mum for him, but also still being the business owner I need to be. Yeah. But I think, in any profession there is a balance there and a juggle, but you're right. And when you're working,
that's really important.
It's hard.
I think that's a really important point, because I think that because more people are working from home just now as well, that's going to become much more kind of ingrained in that it's very difficult if you're working from home to not take your work home with you. So you have to separate in your day or separate in your working environment, so that you're not trying to be two places at once, and if you see what I mean. Yeah. So you're not trying to be present with your family when you're still thinking about all your business stuff, because you don't have your normal journey to get home where you can kind of declutter your head a little, I think.
Absolutely. And you exercise a lot. We're friends on Facebook, so I see that you're always at the gym or out in the garden doing something. Is that one of your ways, I guess, to deal with what you're doing?
Absolutely. So I do an exercise class normally. Before COVID, I did it twice a week. So I'm doing Facebook Live classes just now, really just as a bit of an escape, so that people who are still wanting to do my class have a means of exercise, I suppose, with gyms being closed. I think that you've obviously created this really good balance of being a mum and being a business owner, and I think
The constant juggle. I don't think you'll ever get it perfect. But
yeah, but that's one of the decisions that I made at the very start of my career, was that I didn't feel that I could give 100% to both a family and to a career, and it was a very conscious decision that I made at that time not to have kids, because I genuinely didn't feel that I could be my best person to both, and that's probably a purely selfish thing, but
no, I've met a lot of business women, and I think that's why there won't be as many female, surgeons, and because it is a decision a lot of people have had to make. And I've worked with a lot of directors of large corporates, etc., that have made that same decision as you, Louise, where they just knew it was one or the other. And for that, a lot of them, it is where they felt they could make the most impact. And I don't think, it's ever an easy decision. It's probably one that people will go back and forth with a lot. But they all seem to have children in their life, and
yeah.
Your sister is it your sister that has children?
So I've got twin brothers, and both my twin brothers, I have a twin sister, but I've got twin brothers.
Two sets of twins?
Yeah, 2 sets of
I had a twin sister, but I didn't realize you had twin brothers as well.
Both my twin brothers have kids. One of my twin brothers has identical triplets, which is probably another reason to not have kids.
Yeah, I was going to say, so there was no chance you were just going to have one anyway.
We must have some weird gene somewhere or other, because identical twins are just fluke.
Yeah.
My wee brother, when he told me that he was having triplets, he just goes, "Yeah, Louise, good job you don't have kids. You'd be having quadruplets just to beat me." And I'm like, no.
You've got loads of children in the family then to keep you busy. And it's nice because you can hand them back and just
exactly.
do nice stuff. And you have 2 dogs. Yeah, I've seen you with the dogs. I saw you paddle boarding with them at Stonehaven.
We're loving that.
Yeah, no, I saw the photos on your Facebook. So anyway, I'm very aware of time. I know you've got work to do. Thank you so much. I think it's been amazing I think that's stuff that we would talk about anyway, but just to get it out there, and hopefully the people listening will be able to learn something or take something away. On the mindfulness part as well, there's an app called SAMTEN, SAMTEN, that are offering that, I think, free for any key worker just now, and it's amazing. It's one of the sort of leaders in the mindfulness world globally that is the voice behind the app, and I know some of the guys that have been involved with creating it. So if you are speaking to any of the nurses, doctors, anyone really in NHS and about mindfulness, then get them to check it out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I genuinely think it's something that we all need to be better at. And one of the things that I took from the program was just how important it is to take time to be grateful for stuff. Mm-hmm. Like every day, wake up and think of like 3 things that you're grateful for, and it could simply be just waking up. Like just 3 things that you are grateful for every day. Just so important, because it's so easy for you to become a little bit complacent in what you've got and to not actually consider how lucky we all are. And especially in this time where we're actually, with the whole coronavirus thing, I genuinely thought a lot more people would have been affected, and a lot of people have obviously been affected. They've had family members and friends that have not survived. But I think that we've got off really lucky in that I genuinely thought that every single person would know or have somebody close by who didn't survive.
Yeah.
So we need to.
It's definitely helped build perspective and just make you realize what you actually need to be happy.
Absolutely.
And all the superficial stuff that we fill our lives up with, that it's not important. And I think we've all been forced to live without it for a while. And it's been an amazing, obviously I'm not saying it's positive that it's happened. There's been a hell of a lot of suffering and a lot of challenge, but in some ways I feel that it's been a fantastic reset for the world. And it's the fact that it's not just, Aberdeen, it's not just the UK, it is global. And it's helped people build relationships with their families. It's helped people, realize what they should be grateful for, and really take that, into what they're thinking about every day. And it's just helped for me. I've just really enjoyed being able to slow down a little bit. And I guess, focus. It's helped me be super focused, and all the priorities just seem so clear now. Whereas when you're busy, it gets lost in translation a lot of the time.
I could speak here for another hour about it, but like, I think it's been a really interesting time.
Yeah, very. And people like yourself and all the other key workers, you know, it's amazing that you're all, you know, just getting on with it as I knew you would. But I think that you'll all be looking forward to going back to some sort of normality, and everything that's been delayed because of the coronavirus. And there's a lot of people that really need seen to right now that are not being seen to because of it. There's going to be busy months ahead, and actually I think that's when it's really going to kick in for people like yourself. It'll be once the, you know, lockdowns eased, etc. There must be a hell of a lot less car accidents coming in right now. No?
Quite a lot of mental health issues, quite a lot of suicide, quite a lot of people jumping out windows.
Okay, yeah.
People out on bikes.
Yeah, I've seen that. Anyway, right, we could talk all day, so I'm gonna wrap it up. Thank you so much for your time. And for anyone listening, please check out Louise's website. And if you've got any speaking engagements, whether that be on stage or webinars for your teams, etc., I can vouch for her. She's a fantastic speaker. So get in touch, follow her on LinkedIn. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for the podcast so that you're updated with future episodes. Thank you very much. Bye.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day.